So I am the sexually frivolous and morally ambiguous pansexual phenomenon, Jack Sexsmith. Pleasure to make your acquaintance, sir.
Tell us a little bit about your journey into wrestling. How did it come about? How did it start?
So I think I realised I had a real problem when I got to like 19 and I hadn't grown out of this crap. And I had sort of an epiphany moment in my university days where I was realising stuff about my sexuality, who I was as a person, and just went, be active in the areas that you're passionate and be unashamed about that. So I started wrestling around about 2010, I think. Just did that for a few years maybe. Great experience, just learning the fundamentals and stuff. Not really working many shows back then. But then I had a horrible knee injury and went away from the scene for a good few years and returned in 2015 after seeing a friend of mine called Sebastian get put in a match with a guy called Zack Sabre Jr., who I thought was the best in the world at the time. And I was blinded by rage and envy and really happy for him, sort of, and just went, well, if he can do it, I'll give it a shot again. And yeah, we've done good things since then, man. It's been cool.
You mentioned exploring your own sexuality, learning about yourself, and that's obviously transcended down into your character. So
yes.
Just talk a little bit about your character and how that merges with who you are.
So my character in the ring is very, very closely linked to the real person that I am. I myself am pansexual. Jack Sexsmith is pansexual. Other than the names, we are one and the same. For me, particularly university time, because I denied a lot about who I was as a person growing up, because I'd been fighting it. I was raised in a working class family, and it was a very different sort of atmosphere for me to be accepting those things about myself. But when I went off to university, I had a big epiphany moment, I call it, where I was just went, you are going to be unashamed about who you are. I used to teach like Christianity in schools. I used to be very, very devout in stuff like that. And then I had this moment where I was like, you are so unhappy. You've got such a wall up, such a shield up. You have to do something about this.
Was it maybe the environment at university? There's a lot of old traditional cliches, if you like. People go to university and they experiment and they do this and they do that. So you're around people who themselves are trying to figure out who they are and they're up for trying to... Do you think maybe that helped you explore who you were that then eventually led to Mr. Sexsmith?
I think very much like my experience of just being away from home and the opportunity to sort of like sink or swim, I suppose, was just a relatively safe space to not reinvent myself as such, but find out who you really are. And a massive part of that was being unashamed, because I'd been denying this for myself for so long. I'd hidden the fact I was a wrestling fan, let alone my sexuality, you know? And here I was just like, look, you're meeting people for the first time. Introduce yourself almost as Pan. Introduce yourself as a wrestling fan, you know? Then give them the opportunity to reject you before you ever care about them, really. And then I was just felt so much safer.
Before we go into speaking about if we think the term pansexual is mainstream and how it's accepted, just talk to us a little bit about what it is, because there are people, I was one, I had to kind of make sure I knew what I was talking about before I came down here, so if I am, then there'll be hundreds of other people around me who aren't 100% sure on what it is. Just give us your understanding.
I find these labels to be very, very interesting in and of themselves, because I for one am not someone who likes to particularly label themselves. I just fundamentally like to be comfortable liking what I like and that be okay. So for me, pansexuality is about hearts and not parts is the mantra that rolls off the tongue. It's more about you meet someone, and regardless of the fact that they may identify as trans or non-binary or male or female, you are attracted to the individual, and that's me. Like I've never been wary of that.
Terms straight, heterosexual, homosexual, or even bisexual, everybody knows what they mean. They are now there. Speak to anybody in this room, anyone you find. Whereas pansexual is growing, think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
10 years ago, obviously, nowhere near as much recognition as there is now. And 10 years from now, would you agree with that sentiment, that statement?
I think the term pan will certainly grow as people start to recognise that there are not solely two gender states to identify with. So I almost feel like the B in LGBT will change to a P because it will become more about, because bi suggests that too, and people are learning more and more that there is so much more than two now. There's such a state of flux, genders works on such a spectrum that as people begin to identify more and more with varying aspects within that spectrum, that term pan will almost overtake bi.
Okay. I've not actually thought that. That's quite interesting. So now, I've got to put down here, as a society, where do you think inclusivity is in sport? But before we go down there, I want to touch on something that you said, where you said you were almost embarrassed to say, I was a wrestling fan, you know what? And you put that on the same page as to talk about your sexuality. Almost like they were one and the same. Now, if I you know, in comment zones, you'd think nobody would have an issue going, hi, I'm a straight guy and I like football.
Yeah.
However, if you go to someone who's pansexual and I like wrestling, you feel a little intimidated almost. What's the difference?
I think it's fair to say that I was very insecure in my younger years, and I was constantly put a mask on, particularly in school. But even at home, I wasn't ready to have anything be challenged necessarily, because it wasn't the social norm, like being a straight person who likes football, say. I think it was... I remember coming out to my dad, and it was so much easier coming out as pan to my dad than it was to come out as a wrestling fan to my dad. And I think that's always sort of resonated with me, of just like, just be you and no one cares. I get stick from my dad about wrestling sometimes. I certainly used to. I get it a great deal less now. Because he's come along to shows, particularly at Progress, and they're just cool, you know? They're just objectively punk rock, football terrace atmosphere, good to be a part of. You wouldn't have to necessarily be a football fan to get caught up in that atmosphere.
If there is an invisible line, so to speak, to get over, to say I'm a wrestling fan, I'm involved in wrestling, I'm active in the wrestling scene, do you think that scene of people they've made that decision themselves to go and participate, to go and watch on a regular basis, are they inclusive of you and your sport and your sexuality because they've overcome that line, that little mini battle with accepting themselves as they are?
I think it's hard to suggest that everyone was embarrassed to call themselves a wrestling fan because I was, necessarily. I think that was a very personal thing about me and my insecurities about doing anything outside what was I deemed the social norm, or what my family had deemed or friends had deemed the social norm at the time. There was a stigma, particularly in the sort of noughties, because wrestling wasn't cool then. It was hot, the late 90s. And then throughout the noughties, it probably wasn't anymore. The WWE, biggest promotion in the world, had transferred over to a more child-friendly product, and it wasn't very cool, necessarily then. Nowadays, the British independent wrestling scene is cool. It is kitsch, it is niche, it is something that a lot of people want to be a part of. And the things like t-shirt sales now, people aren't embarrassed to wear a Jack Sexsmith shirt most of the time. People aren't embarrassed to wear a CCK shirt, a British Strong Style shirt, because we're not embarrassing anymore.
Does sport in general, do you think, is it a changing scene with inclusion? People who are of different sexual backgrounds, there's more acceptance now than maybe there was generations ago.
When it comes to like inclusivity in sport, and to call pro wrestling a sport is, whilst the atmosphere is very similar, and the locker room mentality I deem very similar from playing a lot of sport in the past. I always felt personally it was my own reservations. I felt like I could have, looking back on it, I could have come out and not many people would have had problems. A lot of the banter was anti-gay, maybe, but that was a linguistic thing to do with masculinity in a hyper-masculine environment. I can comfortably say that since coming out, I haven't had any aggro from my mates, in truth, about it. The ones that did have problems, I don't spend time with anymore, and that's almost reassuring to go, okay then we cut you out, that's cool. And the ones that have stayed, it feels better. When it comes to the locker rooms at wrestling shows, I have never had any problem with any member, any of talent or staff anywhere.
Without naming any names, we wouldn't want to go. You kind of insinuate there that some people did have an issue. Now, was that a straight up issue? Did anyone ever say to you, I'm not cool with what you are, or was it just a vibe that you got from people, or how did that appear?
There were some friends and family who went, I can't get on board with you not being straight, basically, and some of them were hard, particularly family ones, but you make your peace with that and move on and go, okay, I thought there was love there, I thought there was a friendship there or something. But if I can't be the real me, then it was never real. So I've got a degree of peace with all of that. The ones that were not particularly comfortable, but were happy to be educated because they liked me for who I was and just weren't necessarily comfortable at that point with varying sexualities, they've by and large come round as well. And that's been really nice to sort of go, I don't understand this, but I love you. You know, like that was always like, so I'm going to try, and that was always really, really cool.
Let's sink our teeth into the wrestling side.
Go on then.
When you start getting into wrestling, and I mean as a kid watching, this is before you've even considered, we spoke off camera a moment ago about maybe watch WrestleMania or the Royal Rumble, which of course is coming up, and
yes,
we're going to be getting some predictions off you in a little bit. God. Who were the guys that you looked up to? All the girls? The others who involved, the Hulk Hogan, The Rock, whoever it was in those days, you were.
As a fan, when I was particularly young, I loved Kane because I was like, he was a bad guy, but his backstory was so sympathetic. I was like, oh, this poor tortured man is just lashing out. And even as a kid, I was like, oh, bless him. Always loved him, and the mask made him look so intimidating as well. Like, still love him to this day. He's a sensational talent. When I got a little bit older, I liked my hippity hop music, and John Cena when he was coming out and doing the raps beforehand, and then just putting on a sick wrestling match. I was like, this is my bread and butter. Absolute bread and butter. I used to have all of the like long baggy basketball tops when I was a teen, going, oh, I look like such a loser, but it's okay because I'm just John Cena. I think he's absolutely spectacular still, again, to this day. And then there was people like Chuck Palumbo and Billy Gunn, who did something that would be looked upon as a questionable gimmick, with the Billy and Chuck stuff, which was a pseudo-gay tag team at the time that was very much hinted at. But I just loved the fact that we were sort of being represented now, looking back on it. I always wondered why I always gravitated towards it, and it was because it spoke to me. It spoke to me, and Chuck Palumbo, gorgeous. I always had a thing for him.
Do you still know?
I like him now.
Have you ever met any of these guys? The big names?
Yeah, as a fan once. I think went to like autograph signings or something.
Okay.
But I had a WWE tryout in November, and that was a great experience, just to see the sort of areas of performance that they're looking for, the nuances of talent that they look to accentuate, as opposed to different areas of particularly the Brit wrestling scene that I've been in, that they want to see heightened and focus on. That was really interesting. Talking with William Regal was awesome. Robbie Brookside, that was wicked. And it was actually a nice chat with Byron Saxton about how he went from talent to commentary booth, and his involvement and just his passion to stick with this business, this industry, and just to get good at something. Or that, not that he wasn't a good wrestler, but to be a part of something that they wanted to sell and be part of the cog in the wheel sort of thing. Like, that was really interesting. I like that.
A WWE tryout in itself is a huge achievement. What are your career highs? What are the big high hitting?
The biggest moments in my career so far. I had a match at the Electric Ballroom as part of Progress's Super Strong Style tournament, and we'd done a big narrative about me proving myself worthy to get into this tournament. and it was a bit of a coming out party for me, if you'll pardon the pun. And I faced Zach Gibson in the opening round, and when my music played, I was greeted by a sea of rainbow flags. And that, like, I'd come down to the ring, I did my entrance, was like, really serious match, and just looked around, just started crying. I was just overwhelmed by it, like the fact that they wanted to see me there. They thought I deserved to be on that sort of stage, that platform, and it's one of the biggest wrestling tournaments in Europe. You know, like, that was massive. And then the year prior to Alexandra Palace, the show at Alexandra Palace, I'd been at Brixton, and I'd missed out on the show. The promoters told me I'd missed out on the show by the skin of my teeth. They didn't expect me to get the reactions going in to when they'd already sort of booked what they were building to for the card for the Brixton show. So they said, you were really unlucky, I'm sorry. And I was like, bless you, that's a lot, that means a lot. And I watched the show, and I died inside. So I was like, oh man, this would be so good to be a part of. But then, fast forward to a year later, I'd proved myself worthy to be on the Ali Pali show, which was the same equivalent they built to a big September show. And Ali Pali was a big thing for me. I used to go there. My birthday's November the 4th, and every November the 4th, 5th, I'd wind up going to Ali Pali to watch the fireworks as a kid. So to be there on that platform, 2,000 plus people there, was pretty like, yeah. And to feel like you earned it was awesome as well.
Quite predictably, I'm going to go from asking you about a career high to a career low. And you mentioned what would seem like a career low there, where you thought you'd done enough to get on the bill.
Yeah, so the Brixton show was a low point in my career, but I understood it as well. I personally didn't feel I had done enough to get to the state of that. The show was stacked. It was the best wrestlers in the world, some of them, and you fully understood how I was not yet a part of that. And I use that as a motivational tool massively. The hardest thing is not in the ring. It's never in the ring. It's every now and again you'll see a flippant tweet that will bash me for my wrestling, and I'll be like, okay, I'm not to your taste. That's fine. I understand that. Wrestling's a circus. You don't come for the jugglers. You might come for the lion tank. You know, you might come for the gymnasts. I get that. But when somebody will bash me for my sexuality, where I've had to do interviews with the BBC and with The Sun, and I've been appreciated them wanting to hear my story. But then you never should read the comments section. You never should vanity search, but we all do it. And you'll see, I saw a tweet the other day, and it was so offensive, it made me laugh. It was something saying, Jack Sexsmith makes me actively hate the gay community. And they're always the tougher ones to deal with. Because it's like, I've tried to put my head above the parapet. I'm trying to be like, I am out and I am proud about that, and I exist in a world where a lot of people think I shouldn't have, or couldn't rather, in the hyper-masculine world of wrestling. And to be shot down sometimes hurts more than it should.
If that person was here, sitting here right now, would you have what kind of approach would you take? I realise I'm putting you on the spot there.
Yeah.
Feel free not to, would you try and explain yourself, or do you not have to do that?
If that person was here, I am by and large a pacifist. I think, like, doing the Sun article, I was confronted with a lot of... I was expecting a backlash from the traditional Sun reader, perhaps, but I thought infiltrate to educate. If I can get into this kind of thing and just be like, this is what it is to be a pansexual, this is what it is to be a pansexual wrestler, and it works, and we're doing okay, and maybe you, as someone who doesn't identify as the gender norm or heterosexual, you can start to feel accepted in your workplace or with your family and safe people. Just to say, it can happen. Be you, it can happen, and it can work. I got certain comments there did hurt, but the sort of the backlash I got from the lefties for doing an interview within the Sun was really hurtful, because it was like they didn't want to see my agenda. They didn't want to see the fact or listen to the fact that I tried to infiltrate to educate. That was the biggest thing. Because you can be right wing and gay or uncomfortable with your sexuality. So it wasn't. I don't want to be exclusive. I want to educate. So if that person was here now, I'd look to sit them down and I'd look to question why do you think I portray it badly? Okay, this is why I've had to do it like this. You know.
So fair comment. Just finally, let's end on what's your ambition? If I said to you, you could be in the Royal Rumble, you could be at WrestleMania.
I would love to be in the Royal Rumble. I would love to be at WrestleMania. My dream would be to be in the WWE because I grew up watching it. That's what got me into this game.
Who do you think wins the Royal Rumble?
Yeah.
I assume you'll be watching.
I shall be watching the Royal Rumble, yes. If it was me with my Booker's hat on, I would have The Undertaker come in at number 30 and then go on to WrestleMania to face Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns and vanquish the demons of his only 2 defeats at WrestleMania by beating them too.
Could it happen?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach.
Cheers.
Bless you.